Probably enough lead-in time. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Average People Talking Show. Ignore the gamer-esque mess behind me and around me. And understand that I have had a horrible cold since Thursday that I probably got from my children. So tonight's going to be a little rough, but I didn't want to miss this. And I want to get this topic done. And talk a little Bo Burnham. I'm going to do some real overanalyzing of our boy Bo here. As you can see on the screen, I have in front of me the entirety of the transcript of Inside. And so this is your spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about everything that happens in Inside. And if you don't want it to be spoiled, leave now. But what prompted this is the fact that every piece of commentary, every piece of analysis, everything I have watched of people talking about Inside has all kind of included everybody thinks it was about mental health, which it was. Everybody thinks it was about him being stuck inside during the pandemic. I mean, yes, kind of. And very few people got the real theme of the special, in my opinion, and missed the philosophical insights that Bo Burnham is leaving you nugget by nugget throughout the special. So once again, to make this point, I have to spoil the whole thing. This is your final warning. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, at the very beginning, he lays out the situation in the first song, which is called Content. And this is a harken back. You have to understand what happened at the end of Make Happy and where Bo went for a while for this to make sense. But he says, sorry, I look like a mess. I booked a haircut. I got rescheduled. Obviously, that's some pandemic humor. Robert's been a little depressed. So today I'm just going to try getting up, sitting down, going back to work. Might not help, but still it couldn't hurt. I'm sitting down, writing jokes, singing silly songs. I'm sorry I was gone, but look, I made you some content. Daddy made you your favorite, open wide. Here comes the content. And I think this is important off the bat in the very first song, because he's setting a tone here about, I think, kind of a sarcastic approach towards content creation, content creators. And then, Daddy made you your favorite, open wide. I think kind of treating the audience like the babies who are consuming the internet content like baby food. By saying this, he's setting a disposition right from the onset, right from the first song, to what it is that he thinks about that space that he started in, online, on YouTube, making silly songs and silly things for an audience that you never get to see, and more or less act like babies, right? Feed us more, or we cry and we scream. I think that's very intentional. And I think you'll see why it's intentional as we go on here. But not a very positive take on his own audience. So then we flash forward to his second song. Immediately, he says, camera test. There's no commentary. There's no stand-up between the first song and the second song. So it's very much kind of first-person perspective. And then he kind of goes back into his persona here on the second song that he would normally have on stage with singing a song here in the beginning. the world is changing. The planet's heating up. What the fuck is going on? And if you haven't read this or heard it, he hits his own laugh track. Just, hitting home the joke of this is difficult to do while you're sitting there in a studio apartment by yourself, making all of this completely by yourself. And he goes on to say, it's like everything happened all at once. The people are rising in the streets, the war, the drought. The more I look, the more I see nothing to joke about. Is comedy over? Should I leave you alone? Because really, who's going to go for joking at a time like this? There's been a constant theme in Bo Burnham's work just about him maturing about when and what someone should joke about. And he's also very, very self-aware of things about himself, like his whiteness, like his privilege. And he hits that here where he says, I want to help to leave this world better than I found it, and I fear comedy won't help. And the fear is not unfounded. And then he says, what do I do? And then to hit the sarcasm bell as hard as possible, a very godlike in the sky voice comes out and says, healing the world with comedy, the indescribable power of your comedy, the world needs direction. And then he asks the voice, from a white guy like me? And he goes, bingo. And he goes on to say, and this is why I say this is a lot more philosophical and deep than what people are talking about. The world is so fucked up, systematic oppression, income inequality, the other stuff. It is noteworthy that these are the two he mentions here. And the other stuff is all secondary. And I think that that's really important because you're going to see that these are the inevitable functions of capitalism that Karl Marx warned of. And that's what he's going to keep hitting on over and over and over again through the special. He's basically saying the inherent existence of capital and its accumulation from the jump is like the first consequence that all other consequences fall under. They all lead to an income inequality, a systematic form of oppression where those with power and wealth have control over those who do not. And everything else is the other stuff. It's not just a funny joke. And that's the genius of Bo here. And if you doubt me right now, I'm going to give you a whole lot more evidence that he's painting this picture throughout the entire special. So strap in. We're only in the second song, okay? And then he kind of goes back to the first person thing here. And then he goes back to the healing the world with comedy line in the song, making a literal difference metaphorically. A Jew walks into a bar and I saved him a seat. I think he's making light of the fact that if it was as simple as woke acknowledgments of underprivileged and oppressed groups, we could update our comedy, we could do that thing, and would that heal the world? Would it do anything different? Not really. He's starting to hint that that's how he feels here, and he's going to hit that a lot harder as we go. And then he goes on to say, I'm a special kind of white guy. I self-reflected, and I want to be an agent of change. So I'm going to use my privilege for the good. And then again, the sarcastic sky voice says, very cool, way to go. And he goes on to say, American white guys, we've had the floor for at least 400 years, so maybe I should just shut the fuck up. And then there's a long pause. No one's actually capable of doing that. Even if it's the thing that we should do, eventually we're all going to feel like we have to do something. And so it naturally follows that he's like, so what's the solution? And for most woke white liberals, the answer is, I got to be part of the solution. I've got to be part of saving the day here. And he takes a shot at the movie The Blind Side, where Sandra Bullock lives up to every, rich white family helps young black kid from crackhead neighborhood trope it possibly can. And I don't think that's an accident that he does this in this sarcastic tone. And then he talks about some major crises. If you wake up in a house that's full of smoke, don't panic. Call me and I'll tell you a joke. So again, here, he's basically, in a very self-aware way, completely questioning the entire prospect of, is anything left to joke about when the world is this bad? And then we get back to this part. And in his introduction, he obviously explains the fact that it's the pandemic. He's recording this by himself in a studio. And he understands that comedy has utility in helping people feel better. And he says, I hope this special can do for you what it's done for me these last couple months, to distract me from wanting to put a bullet into my head with a gun. So, setting a tone. And I think it's the talking and the stand-up moments in the special that lead people to draw some of the wrong conclusions about what the special's about. I mean, a lot of people made it only about mental health and Bo's mental health. Some people that I saw were saying things like, oh man, somebody should give him a hug. He just needs a hug. Stuff like that. And then especially because he goes into this very first person experience, FaceTime with his mom song, where you can see him visibly getting angry and frustrated with his mom and regretting some of his actions and then apologizing at the end. And they're snapping over stupid shit that doesn't matter. He's talked about his poor relationship with his parents post-adulthood before in his other comedy. So this follows from that. But then, after FaceTime with my mom, it completely stops. And we have a break. And here is where, in what is now the fourth song of the special, it really takes the turn towards Karl Marx. And so if you doubted my title and you're like, Alex, what are you going on about? Get ready. Because we're going on a journey into Das Kapital. All right. Hey, kids. Today we're going to learn about the world. So right from the beginning of this song, he sets the tone that it's going to be a kid's song and it's upbeat and he's wearing like nicer clothes and he's just all kind of, very jovial. And it's basically a song about the world and how it functions, like a happy kid song about nature. And then he says, the secret is the world can only work when everything works together. A bee drinks from a flower, leaves with its pollen. A squirrel in a tree spreads the seeds that have fallen. Everything works together. The biggest elephant, the littlest fly, gophers underground, the birds in the sky, every single cricket and every fish in the sea gives what they can and gets what they need. If you're not familiar with what that sentence is, it's a direct paraphrase of from each according to his ability and to each according to his own needs. It's this observation about the state of nature that Karl Marx had. That nature is essentially stateless, classless, moneyless, and those are inventions of culture that human beings created, and it creates a system where we exploit each other rather than giving each other, what we can and only taking what we need. We start exploiting each other for excesses and pushing. Now, obviously, the question would remain, what about technological progress? And you may disagree with that or think technological process is inherently good or whatever. Marx had his own opinions on that. But this sentence right here is the dead giveaway. Gives what they can and gets what they need. Could not be more obvious that that's from each according to his ability and to each according to his own needs. And he finishes that by saying, that's how the world works. That's how the world works. And then a sock puppet stops by. And the sock puppet, if you haven't seen this song, you should check it out. It's doing two things for Bo here. It's contrasting the two perspectives and giving some brutal history once you take the childish face off of it. It's also a callback to Bo's favorite comedian, who was a Dutch absurdist, who used a sock puppet in one of his routines. And both of those things are going. So he asks Sacco to join him. So this part right here, where he's talking about being in a constant state of sleep paralysis, and Sacco has this like weird like dual experience. That's the reference to the Dutch absurdist comedian. But Sacco has some interesting opinions to say about how the world works. So, the simple narrative taught in every history class is demonstrably false and pedagogically classist. So, classist is a word that somebody who's a fan of Karl Marx would use to describe types of opinions and types of thinking that are inherently in favor of a class system where those who are of a higher class are justified to be there because of hard work, because they earned it on their merits, because of a number of different reasons. And pedagogy is the style and the nature of which we teach. It's like a theory of teaching, right? So what he's saying is, pedagogically, all of what we teach about world history and in a history class is from the point of view of upper class people of a victorious society in every war, and fundamentally views us as winners and as right and as morally just. And it's this fundamental picture that gives us a biased and incorrect view of history. And so then he goes on to explain what's it missing? Well, don't you know that the world is built with blood and genocide and exploitation? And why is that? Well, for all kinds of reasons that probably started with the invention of money. And he's going to explain that the global network of capital essentially functions to separate the worker from the means of production. That is straight up Karl Marx, if you don't know. And what's the point here? What does this mean? It means before global systems of capital and money, currency worked in a much simpler way in the pre-industrial era. You know, maybe you had a barber, right, who owned his own shop, used the labor from his own shop to keep his own profits, and did that all. This is one of the ways we still see it today in the service industry. That's pretty much how the barber works. But right down the street from the barber, you might have had some kind of clothing maker, be it shoes, shirts, coats, whatever, and they owned the full means of production. Maybe they skinned the leather for the materials they needed, created the jackets, stitched them together, owned the shop they sold them in, got the profits for all the work of maintaining the shop, making the coats, doing all of that, and then, called it a day after that. Factories happened, and now what happens? We have either machines or people working on an assembly line, and instead of owning the means of producing the entire good, the entire thing, and getting the profits from it, now you're just one person on the assembly line. Maybe you poke the lace hole in the shoe, maybe you sew the button onto the coat, and then it moves down the line for the next person to do their job. And the problem with that is the factory owner says, thank you for your labor. Here's what I've deemed that labor is worth. You don't actually own the means of producing this. I own all the materials in the factory that you get to work in. Therefore, I get to keep all of the profits after I've paid you a fair wage. This inherent system where the shop owner gets to own everything, including all of your labor, is what it means. It means the average worker post-industrial age is separated from the means of production. They're not directly benefiting from the fruit of their labor. And that was the point there. FBI killed Martin Luther King. That's probably true. If you've never looked into that, there's good reason to think it's true. But then here's another Karl Marx point. Private property is inherently theft. So this is the one I wanted to hover on. And the rhyme here, and neoliberal fascists are destroying the left. Let's define some terms really quick. So a neoliberal is not quite liberal in what we used to mean, right? Policies promote free market capitalism, deregulation, and reduction in government spending. So they're liberal in name only while supporting a more or less laissez-faire capitalist set of policies. And if you don't know what fascists are, I'm not going to sit here and explain it to you. So contrasting that with private property's inherently theft, what does he mean by that? Well, there's a number of different arguments that have been put forward by philosophers. And it's been argued in a couple of different ways that essentially argue that no one truly has a right to private property. The earth does not belong to anyone. My favorite version of this is actually one of my own, and I call it the two-person universe, right? So there's a universe, and you have one person in it. And he gets there, and he realizes, I'm the only one here. So he claims all the land for himself, says this must all be mine. I guess I own all of this because I'm the only one in this universe. And builds himself shelter, sets up a sustainable way to make food and earn food. And once he does all this, all of a sudden a second person shows up. Now, depending on where you fall on this, some people fall differently. Hang on. Sorry about that. This cold is really kicking my ass. So, if the second person shows up and is now in this universe, you have the first person who, if he goes up to that person and says, hey, look, I don't know what you think you're doing. I own all of this. So, you're going to have to go find your own land and your own ways of getting food and everything. Would we really think such a person had a right to say that? or is moral to say that, essentially they're getting in the way of that other person having the access to the means of survival. Coming in between them and the basic properties of the earth that allows our lives to thrive off of it. Now, take it a step further and say, well, maybe he could go work for him. Okay, so if he goes to that person and says, well, if you want any part of my land and my food, you're going to have to work for me. And you're going to have to agree to my terms explicitly. Unless he says his version of that is you have to live in this much poorer shelter that's out there, right? Some barn without, real protection from the elements. You only get this tiny little bit of food and you have to do most of the work. Because it's on his terms, right? He claims that he owns all of it. Does he have a right to do that? It's his private property. He got to it first. I think when you think of an example like that, it's pretty obvious that he does not have a moral... He has no inherent right to this land just because he got there first. It doesn't matter how much labor he put into it. It doesn't matter how hard he worked to cultivate that land. I think at bottom, most of us would say, at a minimum, he owes the other person now, some people would say an equal share of the land, or at minimum, a basic share of the land enough to live and sustain himself. Hold on. And so another version of the private property inherently theft argument that I think is really useful, we could call it the Spaceballs argument, which is, let's say somebody using their labor and their means sucked all the air out of the atmosphere and then mixed it with their labor, made it better air somehow, and then sold it back to all of us and said, you can either pay for it with money or you can come work for me and follow my orders. But you better decide which one you want to do quick, because I own the air now. I mixed my labor with it, and so it's better air. And you better decide fast because you have 7 minutes. I think all of us can see no one has a right to the air in the atmosphere. So why do we think the land itself is any different? Clearly it's not. And so philosophically, Bo's point is that by perpetuating the system of laissez-faire capitalism, neoliberal fascists are completely destroying the real left. And I think the implication is the real left is communists and socialists who think private property is inherently theft. And if you weren't paying real close attention here, you would have missed that. And that's important because it's going to set up a lot of the other points he's making going forward. And so what does he follow that up with? Why is it this way? Well, because every politician and every cop on the street protects the interests of the pedophilic corporate elite. Again, a lot of people's really dumb and wrong opinions that I saw on this is that was somehow a reference to like QAnon. Does Bo Burnham sound like a QAnon conspiracy theorist to any of you? That corporate elites are hiding, 8-year-olds in their basements and Pizzagate and all that nonsense? Clearly not. He's not the kind of person who would buy that, right? So why did he say it? Is it meant to satirize the whole piece and say that none of this is true? It would be really weird if that one line that Sacco sings is of a different attitude and a different tone and of a different truth intent than the rest of what Sacco is saying. He's clearly trying to tell you secret truths about the world that you don't know, right? So I don't think it's that. So if he's not a QAnon believer, what does he mean by the pedophilic corporate elite. Again, subtle Karl Marx point here, but women become commodities and children become commodities when capitalism is brought to its extremes. That is a point that was made by Marx. And here you have a scenario where ask yourself the question, who are the people constantly getting in trouble for marrying teenagers, having sexual relationship with teenagers? Obviously, we know about the R. Kelly story. We know about the, Jeffrey Epstein allegations. And we also know how many people have tried to distance themselves from Jeffrey Epstein in every way. Even though we have pictures of politicians with him, we have pictures of other rich and famous people with him, and people have tried to deny these connections fast and wide because they know this pedophilic mentality is way more common in rich people world than a lot of people realize. There's a lot of older men and rich, powerful women sometimes with a lot younger people that you don't normally see on average in regular society. Because money makes this possible. Money makes everything a commodity. And I think that that's clear in the song, that's Bo's point. That there's something a little deeper here. And that's kind of where it ends for Sako's explanation. And then they have a conversation. And Bo's like, that's pretty intense. And he goes, yeah, no shit. And he goes, what can I do to help? And Sako's like, read a book? I don't know. Just don't burden me with the responsibility of educating you. It's incredibly exhausting. And then Bo goes on to say, I'm sorry, Sako. I was just trying to become a better person. A callback to what he was talking about in his earlier songs, where he clearly thinks comedy won't help any of the world's problems, but just wants to do whatever he can to help out without standing on the sidelines. And Sako tells him how it really is. And he says, why do you rich fucking white people insist on seeing every socio-political conflict through the myopic lens of your own self-actualization? This isn't about you. So either get with it or get out of the fucking way. And then, because Sako gets lippy with him, Bo makes sure to reestablish the power balance and says, remember who's on whose hand here. Implying that any of us who dare to speak up about all of the problems Sako mentioned, right? We're still on the hand of the powerful. They'll let us talk, but if we actually trying to start fighting them and putting them on an equal level with us and getting them to realize what they're doing to us and that they're pretending to actually help out and it's not our job to get them to figure it out, it immediately comes back to them overpowering us with whatever means that they have. And he starts to pull Sako off of his hand, reestablishing that power. And then he kind of gets very paternal with him and he's like, are you going to behave yourself? And he demands that he says, yes, sir. Like, look at me. And then he says, I hope you learned your lesson. How dare you challenge power? And Sako says, I did and it hurt. Which is another implication that Bo is going to tie back to later on in the special, where it's clear to me that Bo thinks it's mostly useless to even try. To try to fight it, to try to speak up. You're just going to get a taught a lesson because this power is, this ship of unimaginable power has sailed. And unless the entire system comes crumbling down and collapses through some kind of major disaster or revolution, it's all over. So there's no point. And now you just get to know all of this and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's sounds pretty dark, and it's darker than what a lot of people thought, but now you might understand the mental health of Bo Burnham when I get to the end of this, when you're thinking like he's thinking, and when you're sometimes thinking like I'm thinking, to be honest. So then there's a shift in the special. We've completed the songs. He's laid out the opening 4 tracks. It's kind of the full first act, and we haven't had any stand-up or skits or anything like that. We've just had an explanation of what's going on and some songs, right? And then we switch to kind of a sketch where Bo Burnham shifts his character. And he says, "Hi, my name's Bo Burnham, former comedian turned social brand consultant." And he starts doing this bit where he's kind of like joking about consumers wanting to know if companies are willing to use your brand awareness to affect positive social change. And then he says, which will create more brand awareness. And this entire bit, I'm not going to go into too details here. You should go watch it yourself. But he basically is just implying that all of the social change done by corporations is only for the purpose of growing their business and growing their capital and growing more brand awareness for themselves. And that the second there was a opportunity, if it was in vogue and made them more money to be racist, they would be racist. They could care less about actually fighting racism. When he makes this joke about JP Morgan, he says, just be honest, tell your customers that JP Morgan is against racism and theory. And that's the joke that he's making. So then he switches to the famous song you heard on TikTok probably 100 times by now, White Woman's Instagram. And again, it's pretty hard to notice this if you're not thinking philosophically when you watch it. And this is probably a good time, 45 minutes in to tell you. I have watched this special roughly 10 times total now. Mike is complaining about it behind me. 7 million times, she says. I've watched it right around 10 times. I've taken in a lot of the themes of it. And each time I watch it, I'm more and more convinced of what I'm putting forward now. That every single part of this, yes, he touches on mental health, but he's telling you why his mental health is bad. It's just you got to dig a little to get there. Yes, he's touching on the pandemic causing a lot of distress, but he's pointing out that all it's doing is letting you stop and think about the real problems and the fact that they're so systemic, they're so fundamental. Again, remember, in that song, he says, systematic oppression, income inequality, the other stuff. There's a reason why those are the two that are mentioned, because they're the structural problems that all other problems flow from. So, is White Woman's Instagram just a song making fun of white women who post really cliche things on Instagram? I mean, we've all seen kind of what he's talking about in the song. Well, that would be really weird considering he's already had some really deep meaning kind of themes throughout the first 4 songs and then even the sketch where he's making some really deep points. So there's got to be more to it than the surface, right? So the beginning part, he's just, naming things, and on the special you can see him, actually showing these things. Latte foam art, tiny pumpkins, fuzzy comfy socks. And on the screen, he's doing very Instagram-y type pictures as he's dancing around. And then he hits the chorus, a white woman's Instagram, over and over again. Now, then he takes a turn, and this is important. He's been stuck in the frame ratio of an Instagram photo for the entirety of this song. And during this one moment of the song, the picture widens back to your widescreen ratio. And it says, her favorite photo of her mom. The caption says, I can't believe it. It's been a decade since you've been gone. And I think the widening of the camera there is to say that the scope of the depth of human experience is wider than the narrow frame of the Instagram picture ratio. And I think he's trying to say that there's something wholesome here. And he goes on to say, I can't believe it. It's been a decade since you've been gone. Mama, I miss you. I miss sitting with you in the front yard. Still figuring out how to keep living without you. It's got a little better, but it's still hard. Mama, I got a job and my own apartment. I got a boyfriend and I'm crazy about him. And see, now at this point, that picture aspect starts to narrow back into the Instagram photo when it's the highlight reel of, oh, here's what my life, and I think I'm telling you, Mom, but what am I really doing? I'm telling my Instagram followers to generate likes and generate clicks, which generates profit for Mark Zuckerberg and the gang. And you're not going to get any of this, and while it might make me feel okay in the moment, all of this is empty and vacuous and doesn't actually amount to real value. I don't want to put words in Bo's mouth, but that was the messaging that I got. And I would just say, you know, if you're looking for a deeper meaning and you've got a better explanation as to what's going on there, let me know. Let's hash it out. Because then he gets back to, you know, the goat cheese salad. And then he starts really taking shots at white women. Incredibly derivative political street art. A dream catcher bought from Urban Outfitters, a vintage neon sign, and then he goes on after asking, is it heaven? It's a white woman's Instagram, and finishes that part. You know, basically implying that I'm missing the quote that's misattributed to Martin Luther King. I'm wondering if they didn't include that in the... Okay, it's at the end of the last one. Some random quote from Lord of the Rings incorrectly attributed to Martin Luther King. So that was like, oh, okay, it's not that big a deal. And then later, he's really taking some shots. So he follows this up with a question. And the question is going to imply, again, he's laid the groundwork so far for the Karl Marx argument that private property is theft, capitalism is the source of all of our problems, and we all got that from a commie sock puppet. It's all fun and games. But now he has a question for the audience, which is it necessary that every single person on this planet expresses every single opinion they have on everything that occurs all at the same time? Obviously, that's a reference to social media. And then he says to ask it in a different way, can anyone shut the fuck up? Can any single one shut the fuck up about anything? And then he asks, is that possible? And he says, and I know what you're thinking. You're not shutting the fuck up right now. And that's true, but... And then it flips into another anti-capitalist song. This next song that he does is an incredibly... It's the beginning of a very self-aware criticism that he's going to kind of do. And I think the whole point about getting you to shut the fuck up for an hour is he's trying to ask you to stop and really pay attention to his message, because there's something deeper for you to find. And that's why he's saying, yeah, you're not shutting the fuck up right now. And he says, that's true, but let me give you an example of why I'm not, because here's the type of thinking that I've gone through, and I think he's recommending that you should too. So what's the song? The song is about being an unpaid intern. I think it's called Unpaid Intern is the name of it. But he references typical intern bullshit tasks and then says, barely people, somehow legal, unpaid intern. You work all day, go back to your dorm, and since you can't afford a mortgage, you just torrent a porn. Lack of being able to get property in late capitalism is another function of the ultimate ending of capital, the ultimate instability of capital. Karl Marx's view was that eventually capitalism necessarily dictates that all the capital will always flow to the factory owners, to the point where we are all just renting, and 90% of us can't get to own anything. You can't afford a mortgage, right? And so what do? We just rent things that give meaning. And he leaves it with unpaid. It's a very short, very brief song, but still very clearly anti-capitalist or anti-modern capitalist. And he says, hey everybody, I thought I'd do a reaction video to the song that you just saw me perform. And again, he's very self-aware of the irony here of him being a comic that started on YouTube, making content, which he implied in the first song. Oh yeah, Daddy's back, made you some content, open wide, internet babies, right? And now he's like, okay, I'm going to do a reaction video going back to the Bo Burnham roots. Thought that might be fun. And he starts reacting to his own song, which is important because this self-reflection is going to tell you a little bit about the self-reflection Bo thinks you should do about yourself. He says, I like this song. Idea was basically there were a lot of songs in the past about working class jobs, not a lot labor exploitation in the modern world, so that was the idea. And then he just makes casual comments about changes to his appearance. And he says, and then you cut. And I think it's funny to cut right on, do a reaction video of the song that you just saw me perform. And then he gets like confused because his reaction on the special starts right after it. And he starts reacting to the reaction of the reaction, which is like, hey, when you react the second time and it's not this immediate thing, you get a little bit more insight. So he goes a little deeper and he says, I'm explaining what the song means and what it's about, but I'm being a little pretentious. It's an instinct I have where everything I write needs to have some deeper meaning. And then he's like, but it's a stupid song, doesn't really mean anything, and it's unlikable that I feel this desperate need to be seen as intelligent. Well, Bo, I see you as intelligent, buddy, because you were making some points here. And then he reacts again, so he continues the reaction. And he says, now I'm criticizing my initial reaction for being pretentious, which is honestly a defense mechanism. I'm so worried criticism will be levied against me, I levy it at myself before anybody else can. And I think that, if I'm self-aware about being a douchebag, somehow that'll just make me less of a douchebag. But self-awareness doesn't solve anybody of anything. It's not enough to be aware of how shitty you are. What are you doing about it? And that's the point. And then what happens? You guessed it, more anti-capitalism. Right back to a song about Jeffrey Bezos. I'm sure you've heard the Jeffrey Bezos song. And then he says, after the Bezos song, he makes this point. And I want to point out how brilliant I thought this part was, because I think this is where the special turns, and I think it's where it gets really, really, really genius, what Bo Burnham did here in Inside. He says, I don't know about you guys, but I've been thinking recently that maybe allowing giant digital media corporations to exploit, again, exploit is a word that exists in the Marxist view because of capital. Before capital, everyone gives what they can and gets what they need. It all works together. Exploitation happens because of the natural corrupting power of capital. You don't have to agree with Marx, and you certainly don't have to agree with Bo. But that's the point. And I think it's important to understand that he's using exploit in that way. About a capitalistic version of exploit, okay? Allowing giant digital media corporations to exploit the neurochemical drama of our children for profit. Maybe that was a bad call by us. Maybe flattening the entire subjective human experience into a lifeless exchange of value that benefits nobody except for a handful of bug-eyed salamanders in Silicon Valley. Maybe that as a way of life forever. Again, I mentioned this earlier, he's implying we have no way out. We're stuck with these consequences. Maybe that's not good. And then, what's his next thought? I'm horny. And here's where he's implying that the moment you stop to think about these things, the bug-eyed salamanders in Silicon Valley have been so good. Babe. Hold on, I'll be right back. So, what he's saying right here is after he says maybe the flattening of the entire subjective human experience into a lifeless exchange of value that benefits nobody except for a handful of bug-eyed salamanders in Silicon Valley. Maybe that is a way of life forever. Maybe that's not good. Why is the very next thing that happens, he goes, I'm horny? Because that's what happens to all of us. The second we start to question the system, the second we start to actually think about things, you're watching me right now in the same digital space, right? What happens? Distraction. I'm horny. Time to sext. Time to re-engage with my digital tools to accomplish that next little need that I have to fill. And it's all meaningless. It's all part of the value creation in late capitalism where everything is turned into a tech product. Everything is turned into a lifeless exchange of commoditized value. This is commodity fetishism realized. And that's the whole point of the sexting song. If you watched sexting and you just thought, oh, that's a cute, hilarious little song, and haha, I can laugh about that, Bo is very good about burying this a little bit in all of this, but the transitions matter, right? Like everything about this matters. He sat in his guest house making this for over a year for a reason. How do you have this kind of a thought and then randomly switch to I'm horny and it's a song about sexting? Well, because it's funny to do that, but it's also the wrong thing. It's like, don't stop. Actually dig in and solve the problem. And we won't go through the sexting song because just watch it. It's its own glory. But what does he immediately come back to after that? Tells us more of the story. Again, this all happens in order for a reason. Bo was very careful about the way he picked this, and it was clear to me the more times I watched it, where the very next thing he says is, hey, everybody, just wanted to make a really quick video to say thank you for watching my content. As you guys know, I work really hard to try and bring you guys high-quality content you'll enjoy. And the time he's doing it, he's holding a butcher knife at your face. Why? For the fuck of it? Because it's funny? He's been making all these other points the whole rest of the special? No, it's more of the story. It's all of a sudden we get turned on each other with knives just to get by, to make money in the system, and the only people who are benefiting while we turn on each other, making this meaningless content, is the fucking Zuckerberg. And it's an end result of capitalism that led to this whole problem in the first place. That is a level of genius that I didn't probably appreciate until the fourth or fifth time that I watched this. And I couldn't get it out of my head after I made the connection. I've been thinking about it over and over and over again. It's just like, holy crap. And then there's this moment where the camera stops. There's a long pause. And then he cuts back to the next song. Trying to be funny when stuck in a room. It starts with a pretty innocent pursuit, which is how it started for him. He was stuck in a room. And there isn't much to say about it, right? You'll do anything to get out of it. You'll make faces and tell silly jokes. You'll do some shit. And then he goes on to say, well, look who's inside again. Went out to look for a reason to hide again. He'll come back to that theme later. Well, better you found it. Now come out with your hands up because we've got you surrounded. And now he does a song that's kind of about being problematic, and a lot of his earlier content is really messed up, and he talks about previous actions of himself. And so this seems like a break from the overall theme, where it's more that self-introspection. But then he starts to make fun of even that, kind of reacting within the song, just like he did with the reaction in the video earlier. Because he says, I've done a lot of self-reflecting since I started singing this song, and I was totally wrong when I said it. Because he's referring to trying to hide behind his childhood, as if that gets him away from any of this. And then there's this really funny moment later where he kind of puts himself on a cross for his old stuff. So what's this all coming to? Does he have any reprieve from us after doing more self-reflection? Has he learned anything? Well, he says no. He's been working on the special for the 6 months with a goal in mind of finishing it before he turned 30, because he didn't want to turn 30 while still being stuck in the fucking room working on this thing alone without social contact. But we're all stuck in the pandemic. We're all still fighting it out. And then he turns 30 in the special. Turning 30, super relatable song for me. Not really any political commentary in there. I mean, he references my dad fought in Vietnam when he was 27, or his granddad did when he was 27. He built a birdhouse with his mom. And then he says something that is important. And you're like, no, does this song even have a break from the political commentary? Unfortunately, no. I used to make fun of the boomers in retrospect a bit too much. Now all these fucking zoomers are telling me that I'm out of touch. Oh yeah, well your fucking phones are poisoning your minds, okay? Clearly tying in the themes of the last couple songs and things that he said. So when you develop a dissociative mental disorder in your late 20s, don't come crawling back to me. That's a reference to what was going on with him, and it's a projection that he's saying, you should be listening to me about the dangers of all this shit. You're just telling me I'm out of touch. I'm trying to tell you your phone's poisoning your mind, and it's only doing it to just add value to these other guys. And then he references a suicidal ideation here at the end of the song. And after the suicidal ideation, he immediately kind of reflects on it and says, I want to say for the record that I don't want to kill myself. And if you're out there and you're struggling with suicidal thoughts and you want to kill yourself, and then he kind of like jokes. He's like, just don't. Okay, can you not, please? And then it zooms out, and there's an inner Bo Burnham telling that story on his shirt. And he's just sitting there still stuck with the thoughts. And he talks about wanting to be temporarily dead for a short period of time. In the next song, it's kind of an intermission song. And it doesn't really mean anything politically. But then he comes back to another thing of internet culture. He says, what's up, boys? Welcome to the stream. I'm going to be doing some live play today for the first time in a while. And there's a moment earlier in the special where you can see him holding the controller, where he's controlling himself as a character in a video game. And he flashes back to it very, very, very early in the special. As if the whole special is just part of the content getting recorded for the online. The whole thing's a game. Mind explosion. This is his whole point. His whole point is everything. This whole subjective human experience. Anything that we could do is all just content. And we're none of it is real. All of it's fake. And so that's kind of what he implies. He does a very good parody of a Twitch streamer, making some jokes about gifting subs, different thing like that. He just keeps making him cry or whatever. And then the very next song, there's also, like, there's clearly just nothing of value happening. He's just thanking people for subs, stuff like that. And then it's the I'm feeling like a bag of shit song. This song just sets the mood. And I think this turn of the special, after we've had all this introspection and realizing that everything's fucked up because of capitalism and all these problems and him, I think this is why everybody was so distracted and thought that this whole thing was just about like mental health. And he talks about his mental health rapidly approaching an all-time low and references dissociation disorder again. My vision starts to flatten, my heart, it gets to tapping, and I think I'm going to die. And he's talking about anxiety here. And then immediately follows all of that. What's the cause of all this? What's making you feel so sick? Well, welcome to the internet. If you haven't heard this song, I'm not going to go lyric for lyric. Some of what gets referenced is pretty intense, but I encourage you to listen to it. But the main theme is welcome to the internet. We've got everything. Everything from porn parodies of other content. It's basically content of other content. And all of real life, all of experience has been flattened into this space. Everything from conspiracy theory to tragedy to crime to comedy. It's all here. And what's the chorus? Could I interest you in everything all of the time? Apathy is a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Anything and everything all of the time. And then he says, it wasn't always like this. Right before the towers fell, circa 99, we had catalogs, travel blogs, and a chat room or two. And the development of the internet came from, these people that wanted more and more of your time. When he's talking from the internet's perspective, he says, we set our sights and spent our nights waiting for you. Because you used to have to go to work and wait to come home and use the computer. But then what happens? Mommy lets you use her iPad and you were barely two. And it did everything we designed it to do. And now look at you. And he's implying that we're stuck. The bug-eyed salamanders have corrupted an entire generation, got them all addicted to the content machine. All of them are totally ignoring the real world and all of the problems. And we've got you. And it worked exactly as it was intended. As I think the implication there. But go listen to that song. For sure. He does some more commentary, just introspective thoughts. And basically just says, I'm just talking to myself here. So fuck you. Let's keep going. Because I'm never going to finish it. Because then if I have to finish it, I have to be done. And again, it's interesting that followed the Welcome to the Internet song of the endless content loop, because essentially what he's saying is stopping working and having to go back to being bored and apathetic is equivalent to death. We have to keep the content going. And then the very next song is Jeffrey Bezos again, but this time he just says, you did it. Congrats. And I think that's on purpose again. I really think all of this is intentional. He's trying to tell a story here. What did Jeffrey do? Jeffrey and the boys managed to successfully rewire an entire generation's brains. And now we'll never win. We'll never have this solved. So after that one, there's a big tonal shift in the special. You're nearing the last act. And he goes back to one of the only times, there's really only about 2 times throughout the whole special that he actually does stand-up. And this is one of them. And he says, give it up for yourselves. supporting live comedy in these weird times. It's crazy. But isn't it great that we can get together and we can laugh? And this whole thing kind of seems hollow. And he says, I've learned something over this last year, which is pretty funny. I think that's important because he's telling the truth here. This isn't just a setup. I've learned that the real world human-to-human tactile contact will kill you, and that all human interaction, whether it be social, political, spiritual, sexual, or interpersonal, should be contained in the much more safe, much more real, interior digital space. Let that sink in for a minute. The outside world, the non-digital world, is merely a theatrical space in which one stages and records content for the much more real, much more vital digital space. One should only engage with the outside world as one engages with a coal mine. Suit up, gather what's needed, return to the surface. And then he does this really weird bit where he's just like, is it just me or do pirates need to take a little bit better care of their fucking maps? When I find a pirate, it's always tea-stained and the edges are burnt. And it's like, if you're a pirate, all right, you're going to make this map and expect me to carry it around the globe as I search for your treasure, then laminate it. And he just... Love you too, Liam. Love you too. He's just kind of like making this really silly joke after like this really deep thought. It seems like a non sequitur. But I do like the theme here of pirates, because that's a term that we use differently with the internet. And that the map to the treasure is difficult to read. And it's hard to understand. What's up? Yeah. So then he cuts into my favorite song of the special. And there are a lot of insights one by one in this next part. Stunning 8K resolution meditation app. The whole point of meditation is to unplug and pay attention to your mind. So like he's starting off the song with a juxtaposition of two themes, and that carries through the whole song. Yeah, oh, it's so good. And the point is, we've now fully laid out the difference between reality, the digital world, and the fake reality, the one we used to live in, that has now just become content for the capitalist interior digital space. This is his whole point, is that this is what he means by your phone is poisoning your mind, okay? In honor of the revolution, it's half off at the Gap. Again, some irony there. Deadpool self-awareness, loving parents, harmless fun. The backlash to the thing that's just begun. So, here's the internet content style of Deadpool of my life. Meanwhile, something has just begun and we can already go through the entire steps of the backlash to the backlash. And there it is again, the funny feeling. We're going to learn what that funny feeling is later. And then he says, Surgeon General's pop-up shop, Robert Iger's face, discount Etsy agitprop, Bugle's take on race. Female Colonel Sanders, easy answers, Civil War, the whole world at your fingertips, another reference to a cell phone, the ocean at your door. We talk about climate change, and he's referenced climate change twice now throughout the special. And if you're on the right, you don't care. And if you're on the left, you act like all you do is care about it. But his point is the neoliberal fascists that are destroying the left are keeping you focused on the end results. Right? Bugle's taking on race and these things like 8K resolution meditation apps. They're distractions from the fact that all of this is a product of one big evil. Capital, capital, capital. And it's very subtle, and you might think, if you think I'm reading into this and I haven't convinced you this far in, I don't know what to tell you. Tell me how I'm just reading into this. Again, I can't overlook the reference to your phone here and the juxtaposition that he's doing every line in the song. The whole world at your fingertips, but what are we getting for it? The ocean at our door. Sea levels rising. Massive amount of people going to lose their homes and their lives due to fucking climate change because we have to make fucking black screens. And then he goes on to say, the live action Lion King, which used to just be called Africa, the Pepsi halftime show, 20,000 years of this, 7 more to go. We've destroyed the world and there's no going back. And that's his point. The live action Lion King, if you really wanted that, it was 100,000 years ago before it was 20,000 years ago before we ruined the world with capital. That's his point. A gift shop at the gun range, a mass shooting at the mall. There it is, that funny feeling. This, again, back and forth juxtaposition of real life to fake life. Real digital life, as he implied in the previous, stand-up bit, to the fake life of the real world. Going for a drive, obeying all the traffic laws in Grand Theft Auto 5. Full agoraphobic, losing focus, cover blown. A book on getting better hand-delivered by a drone. And then, again, what's the funny feeling? Total disassociation, being fully out of your mind, Googling derealization and hating what you find. Here's another climate change reference, that unapparent summer air and early fall, the quiet comprehending of the ending of it all. And then he says, we were overdue, but it'll be over soon. You wait. He doesn't even care if you believe him. He doesn't even care if you don't notice. He's become so apathetic and so disassociated with all of, reality that it's like, fuck it, whatever. The ending's coming and I don't care. And then he does some more, he ends with some final stand-up here, and we'll bring this to a crescendo, and you'll see how Bo does as well. And he's doing the typical thank you that a lot of comedians do towards the end of their special. And he says, but just knowing you're here, feeling you here with me, thank you. I hate to ask because you've given me so much, but I need you to do one thing for me. And then he goes back to his typical ending to his specials. Bo Burnham goes kind of full Yeezy and starts doing the song of get your fucking hands up, get on out of your seats, all eyes on me. But does this mean he's wrapping it up? Does he not have any commentary left for us? Oh no, he's got commentary for us. Are you having fun? It's almost over. It's just begun. Don't overthink this. Look in my eye. Don't be scared. Don't be shy. Come on in. The water's fine. We're going to go where everybody knows everybody knows. What does everybody know? I think he's implying here, and it's harder to pick this up, but he's implying that if you come on this journey and you pay attention to what he's really saying, on the other side of this, we all know what's really up, that the world is already lost, it's already over, and there's nothing we can do about it. And then he does that in the middle of the song about talking about how he quit stand-up and got his mental health better, decided to start performing again, and then in 2020 when he started back, he had been hiding from the world, and then all of a sudden the pandemic happens as the implication of the joke. He still is doing the easy thing. And then he sings the ending song. Now, let's see if the ending will tie it all together for us and tell us something. And I think if you weren't paying attention to all of the themes I mentioned, because yeah, the mental health is there, and yeah, the pandemic is there, but obviously from the actual words and the meaning of the songs, the pandemic's not really there. The pandemic is background, and the mental health is background. I think once you see it this way, you can't unsee that. And so, what does he say? He says, I'll see you when I see you. Meet you on the other side. Do I really have to finish? Do returns always diminish? That's a capitalism term, right? Let's pull this up on Google really quick. Diminishing returns. Proportionally smaller profits derived from something as more money or energy is invested in it. Which is the truth of everything in modern world anymore. And then he says, did I say that right? Does anybody want to even joke when no one's laughing in the background? That's a pandemic reference. I promise to never go outside again. I'm slowly losing power. Has it only been an hour? No, that can't be right. Hey, here's a fun idea. How about I sit on the couch and watch you next time? I want to hear you tell a joke when no one's laughing in the background. Am I going crazy? Would I even know? Am I right back where I started 14 years ago? Just still making content to upload to the internet, which is just a lifeless exchange of value as we've established all throughout the special? I swear to God that all I've ever wanted was a little bit of everything all of the time. Now he's showing us he's guilty. He's admitting it. He's saying, I am sucked into the same vices you guys are. I'm finished playing and I'm staying inside. And if I wake up in a house that's full of smoke, I'll panic because I have anxiety, as I told you earlier. Call me up and tell me a joke. And when I'm fully irrelevant and totally broken, damn it, call me and tell me a joke. And I'll be like, oh shit, are you really joking at a time like this? And then we hear the booming voice from earlier, the God voice, right? That says, well, look who's inside again. You went out to look for a reason to hide again. Buddy, you found it. Now come out with your hands up. We've got you surrounded. And the ending of the special is he gets revealed as kind of naked, and there's this thought process of like, oh my God, they all see who I really am. I've exposed myself. I've put it all out there. And I think what he's exposing himself and putting all out there is that he has some pretty extreme views on some of this, if you're willing to look and if you're actually paying attention. And he does have these mental health issues, and he's put it all out there. And then he goes outside, and in a very old-timey, old-style comedy way, he gets locked out of the guest house. And the whole crowd starts laughing as he's watching kind of an old film of him like trying to get back into the house and it's locked and he's having a panic attack and he's freaking out and the whole crowd's laughing while he's really freaking out and he just wants to get back to his safe space inside the house. And then he has a casual laugh at it himself to tell you, the audience, that look, it's all fucked up. We're all messed up. Yeah, it's all ending and there's nothing we can do about it but laugh together. It's all on the table. And he has a laugh at himself and admits that it's kind of funny. And I hope it's clear with the ending. Again, I want to come back to we were overdue. But it'll be over soon. Just wait. You know, like that's really his grand theme of the whole thing. It's phenomenal. Like I said, I've watched it like 10 times. I think the points that he's making and the fact that he keep referencing social media and our cell phones and the digital tech corporations, it's clear to me that this whole special was about the fact that late stage capitalism has resulted in the tech era, which will usher in the ending of the whole world. And if it's not climate change, it'll be ourselves and civil wars and droughts. And I mean, he's referencing this throughout the whole thing. And if I haven't convinced you, like I said, let me know. Come at me. Talk to me, because I'm convinced. And with that, we end the show as we always do, with some onion. What's the headline today? Democrats spooked by loss in Virginia vow to work twice as hard to muddle their agenda. Oh boy. Oh no. Democrats lost bad, including in Virginia, places they should have won, elections they should have won. And people think it's a sign of things to come for the Democrat Party. So, unsettled by the party's dismissal, or the party's dismal performance in the Virginia governor's race, Democratic leadership vowed Wednesday to work twice as hard in the coming months to muddle their agenda. Last night was a wake-up call that we need to refocus our efforts on alienating the American voter with vague goals and incomprehensible messaging, said Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, advising Democrats from Congress Democrats on down to commit themselves to a party-wide effort to baffle new voters with confusing language and a borderline inscrutable agenda. Make no mistake, we heard Virginians loud and clear about what we need to deliver. So if there's a popular section in our legislation, we'll cut it. If any of our candidates attract a genuine following, we'll work to marginalize them. And if we somehow manage to do something people actually like, we'll make sure it's so buried beneath an avalanche of easily avoidable fuck-ups that no one ever hears about it. Simply put, Democrats need to get out there and make it clear that we can't find our own ass with our hands. Schumer went on to say it would be extremely difficult to sell a more muddled message than Build Back Better. But this has always been where the Democrat Party shines. And boy, is that true. It does feel like they're just trying to feed people a big old pile of bullshit and let us think that it's awesome. I hope you enjoyed tonight's deep dive into Bo Burnham and Inside and some Karl Marx philosophy. You might disagree with his whole points, but I think after I showed them to you, I think it's pretty hard to unsee. It's pretty clear that Bo has some affinity for some of the things that Karl Marx talked about and understands that trying to change it is pointless. It's all blowing up on itself anyway. And for those who defend the system, this is me talking now, not Bo, but for those that defend this system, that think it's okay, they can do that all they want. And the joke is ultimately, at the end of the day, on them. They've got the whole world at their fingertips, but the ocean will be at their door before they know it. And on that note, APT is out for the night. Thank you. Love you. Thanks for coming. Help us out. All the social medias. Follow, like, subscribe, do all the... If it's good, please do it. If it's bad, don't do it. You know how it is. You know what it's all this stuff and things and that's where we're gonna take it out for the night. Turn the beats back up. Y'all have a good night.